To Diep vanishes, a secretary's silent conspiracy. Opening scene, the phone that never rang again. The rain poured down like grief itself, cold and relentless, painting the glass walls of James's office in shades of gray. Outside, the city buzzed on in its usual frenzy, but inside the CEO's corner office, time stood still. His fingers trembled slightly as he tapped her name again on the screen. To Diep. The call failed. Again. It had been 48 hours. 48 hours since her last message. 48 hours of silence. She had vanished. No calls, no texts, not even a sign on social media. For a woman who once messaged him just to say the moon was pretty that night, this silence screamed danger. James had faced financial disasters, corporate betrayal, and public trials. But this was fear, raw and personal. A love missing in the static. To Diep had been his light in the storm. The farm girl with sun in her smile and strength in her silence. She had walked into his life like a whisper of peace, and now she was gone like smoke. He visited her house, empty. He asked her neighbors. They only shrugged. They hadn't seen her since market day. He tried tracking her phone, turned off. Desperation clawed at his chest like wildfire. Even the hospital, the police, and the small clinics nearby had no record of her. She couldn't have just disappeared, unless someone had made sure she did. The secretary's smile, sitting at her desk outside his office, James's longtime secretary, smiled with the same calm precision she always had. Still no word from Mr. Diep, sir? She asked sweetly, not looking up from her screen. James didn't reply. There was something decomposed in her voice, something off. Had been loyal for years, efficient, quiet, trustworthy, or so he had thought. But now, he began to notice things. The way she avoided eye contact when he mentioned to Diep. How the logs of office calls from his phone had been mysteriously wiped. How the last GPS ping from Diep's phone was near Mai's apartment, a place Diep had never been. Was he losing his mind? Or was he finally seeing what had been there all along? The shadows of jealousy. Diep had once told him that Mai looked at her strangely, not with dislike, but with the cold curiosity of someone studying a rival. James had brushed it off. Now, he remembered. And he remembered more. The night Diep's phone went missing at a company gala. Mai was the last one to leave the venue. And the morning after, Mai had brewed his coffee just right, smiled a little wider, lingered a little longer in his office. It was subtle. It was terrifying. Conclusion: a race against time. James was done waiting. With every piece of doubt now forming a larger, darker picture, he activated his private investigator, the one he used only when lives, not profits, were on the line. He was going to find Diep. Even if he had to tear down his own company brick by brick, and if Mai truly had something to do with her disappearance, he would unearth the truth, no matter how deep she had buried it. Because Diep was more than love. She was his reason, and no one erased a reason to. Live and got away with it. James stood before Mai's apartment door, heart pounding like a war drum. The investigator had confirmed it. Diep's phone had last pinged here 2 nights ago. The same night she disappeared. The hallway smelled of lilies and faint perfume. Too quiet, too clean. He raised his hand to knock, but the door creaked open, unlocked. Inside, everything was meticulously arranged. White furniture, framed certificates, a glass vase on the dining table filled with orchids. But it wasn't the decor that made James freeze. It was the sight of Diep's scarf, folded neatly on the couch. The same scarf he had given her on their trip to Eilat, a one-of-a-kind piece she wore every winter. His breath caught. She had been here, and then, from the bedroom, a sound, a gasp. He rushed in. There she was, Diep. Her hands were tied, her eyes wide with fear, but alive, bruised but unbroken. James, her voice cracked. You came. He knelt beside her, eyes burning. I thought I lost you. She shook her head. She said if I tried to call you, she took my phone. She knows everything about you, about your routines. She's been watching us. Before James could respond, the click of a pistol echoed through the room. I stood at the door, still calm, still smiling. "I always knew it would come to this," she said softly. I didn't raise the gun. She just stood there, eyes on James. "I served you for 10 years. Watched you rise. Watched you fall in love with someone who didn't belong in your world." James rose slowly, standing between me and Diep. "She belongs more than anyone," he said. I tilted her head. "You didn't even see me, James. Not once. I gave you everything, and you gave her everything else." For a moment, the room held its breath. Then James spoke, steady and cold. "You don't hurt what you love. You protect it. You failed that test." Silence. Then Mai's hands trembled. The gun dropped to the floor. Tears spilled from her eyes, not rage, but heartbreak. "You never looked at me the way you looked at her," she whispered. "I wanted to be your reason to." Police arrived minutes later. Mai didn't resist. She confessed everything: stalking, kidnapping, manipulating company communications, wiping call logs, even deleting Diep's job application months ago, trying to erase her existence from James's orbit. As she was led away, Mai looked at Diep one last time. "He'll forget you one day," she said quietly, "like he forgot me." But James never did. Epilogue: a bench by the river. Weeks passed. James and Diep sat on the wooden bench by the river where they had shared their first kiss. The company was recovering, slowly, painfully. But what mattered was that she was safe, that they were together. "You found me," Diep whispered, resting her head on his shoulder. "I never stopped looking," he replied. "And I never will," she smiled, eyes glistening with tears and morning light, because now they both knew love isn't just about finding someone. It's about never losing them, even when the world tries to take them away. The trial came quickly. Public attention soared. The CEO's secretary turned criminal. Reporters swarmed the courthouse. Cameras flashed. Headlines twisted the story into something scandalous. But inside the courtroom, it was quieter, heavier. Diep sat next to James, her hand firmly in his. She hadn't spoken much since her rescue. Trauma lingered in the silence. Between words, some wounds don't bleed, they echo. Mai entered in handcuffs, thinner than before. Her once sharp eyes seemed dull. She didn't look at James. She didn't look at Diep. But when called to testify, she stood tall. "I did it out of love," she said, voice unwavering. "But I see now, love without respect is obsession. I destroyed the very thing I wanted to protect." The judge nodded. The sentence was fair, not cruel, but firm. 7 years. As they escorted Mai away, she paused at the door and glanced back at James. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but something in her eyes said more, that it wasn't over. Weeks later, James returned to the office. Everything felt new, yet fragile, as if the walls still remembered the footsteps of betrayal. He opened Mai's old computer, now wiped clean by IT. But James, ever meticulous, had the drive restored from a backup, just to see what she had been doing in her final weeks. Most files were routine. Except one, a hidden folder titled Echo_04112. Inside were hundreds of recordings, not of James, not of Diep, but of phone calls with someone else. James listened, heart tightening with every word. The world outside moved on. Traffic roared. Deadlines loomed. Shareholders called. But for James, everything slowed, as if time itself had paused to give him space to breathe again. Diep was home, alive, safe, yet something in her eyes had changed. The laughter still came, but it didn't reach as far. Her smile had a softness that trembled at the edges. When thunder cracked late one night, she woke gasping, clutching his shirt like a child lost in the dark. James held her through it all, but inside, guilt grew like a shadow he couldn't shake. "I should have protected you," he said one evening, tracing the fading bruise on her wrist with his fingertips. Diep turned to him, her voice barely a whisper. "You did. You found me. But I didn't see the signs. I trusted someone who wanted to hurt you." She placed her hand on his chest, You saw the truth when it mattered most. That's what saved me. And yet, in the quiet moments, James still saw Mai's face. Not the rage, but the sadness, the brokenness, the loyalty that twisted into obsession. What frightened him most wasn't her betrayal. It was how easy it had been to overlook her pain. Weeks passed. Diep tried to return to normal, planting herbs on the balcony, playing soft piano tunes in the evening, and laughing when James brought home the wrong groceries. But one day, she hesitated at the doorway. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, as if unsure who she had become. "I used to be fearless," she said. "You still are," James replied. She looked at him with quiet intensity. "I'm trying to be." That night, he found her sitting in the dark, hugging her knees by the window. Outside, rain streaked down like silver threads. He walked over and sat beside her. "You know," she whispered, "when I was tied up in that room, I kept thinking about you, but not the way you think." He stayed silent. "I wondered if you'd blame yourself, if you'd carry the weight of her choice like it was your crime." James turned to her. His voice cracked, because it was, "I trusted her, I let her in." Diep reached out, cupped his face in her hands. "No, you let her help. You showed kindness. She turned it into something else. That's not your fault." James, tears filled his eyes, not out of pain, but out of something deeper: relief, forgiveness, love that endured the storm. In life, we often trust people who wear smiles but hide storms. Betrayal can come not from enemies, but from those we once called family. James's story teaches us that even the strongest can be blindsided, not because they are weak, but because they believe in the goodness of others. Diep's resilience reminds us that survival is not just about being strong, but about having someone who doesn't give up on us, even when we've been lost in the dark. Sometimes, love is not about grand gestures, but the quiet moments, sitting beside someone in silence, listening without fixing, holding on when everything tells you to let go. And perhaps the greatest lesson of all, healing doesn't come from forgetting what hurt us, but from facing it together. It's in learning to trust again, even when our hearts tremble. It's in choosing hope over fear, and it's in forgiving, not because they deserve it, but because we deserve peace. True love isn't just about joy and laughter. It's also about standing in the fire, when everything burns, and choosing to stay. James never stopped searching for Diep, even when the world told him it was hopeless. That kind of devotion teaches us something powerful. When you love someone, you don't give up, even when the path is blurred by fear, lies, or pain. Diep, though broken and hidden away, still held onto a piece of hope, a memory of warmth, of James's voice, of a safe place that once existed. And in the darkest corner of her silence, that hope kept her alive. We learn that strength is not the absence of fear, but the courage to move forward despite it. Trust, once shattered, can be rebuilt, but only through honesty, patience, and time. The heart remembers who fought for it. And in the end, the people who truly love us are not the ones who never leave, but the ones who always return, no matter how far we drift. Because real love doesn't just survive the storm, it learns to dance in the rain.